बीवी को रोब में रखने का तो यही एक तरीका है। मैंने भी अपनी बीवी को समझा दिया है, सीख जाओ बेगम, वरना मैं भी बहुत बुरी तरह पेश आऊंगा।
सठिया गए हो क्या? बीवी पर हाथ उठाना बहादुरी नहीं, बुज़दिली है। और पुरएतमाद मर्द हाथों से नहीं बोलते, बीवी तो हमसफर होती है यार। मैंने तो आज तक अपनी बीवी पे हाथ नहीं उठाया और ना कभी उठाऊंगा। कभी सोचा इससे बच्चों पे क्या असर पड़ेगा? मेरी बात पे गौर करना। जाओ सेल्फ मारो।
बदलो अपनी सोच को, सबके लिए आवाज दो। बस्ती बस्ती नगरी नगरी एक हो के आवाज दो।
ओहो, अकेले अकेले कहाँ? थोड़ी हमें भी लिफ्ट करा दो।
यार ये आप लोग क्या कर रहे हो? अच्छे खासे पढ़े लिखे लगते हो, अकेली लड़कियों को देखकर जुमले कसना, सीटी बजाना, ऐसी हरकतें आपको जेब नहीं देती हैं? खवातीन को घर से बाहर महफूज माहौल फराहम करना हमारा फर्ज है।
बदलो अपनी सोच को, सबके लिए आवाज दो। बस्ती बस्ती नगरी नगरी एक हो के आवाज दो।
भाई मैं जा रही हूँ, दरवाजा लॉक कर लीजिएगा।
यार वैसे मैंने देखा है कि तुम्हारी बहन रोजाना मोहल्ले के बस स्टॉप पे खड़ी होती है। मोहल्ले की लड़कियां इतना बाहर निकले अच्छा थोड़ी लगता है। बेहतर होगा कि अपनी बहन को समझा या उसे रोक दे।
मैं क्यों रोकूं उसे? उससे ये इख्तियार हासिल है कि ये फैसला वो खुद करे। देख भाई, हमें सोच बदलने की जरूरत है, लड़कियों को रोकने की नहीं। बल्ब ऑन कर। लो भाई, आ गई रोशनी।
बदलो अपनी सोच को, सबके लिए आवाज दो। बस्ती बस्ती नगरी नगरी एक हो के आवाज दो।
ला भाई, पाना लिया।
उस्ताद जी,
हाँ
सुना है कल रात को मोहल्ले में क्या हुआ?
तुम्हें पता है मैं इन बातों में नहीं पड़ता। खैर क्या हुआ, कोई खास बात हुई?
अरे गजब हो गया उस्ताद जी, गजब हो गया। इजाज के गुस्से ने तो हद कर दी, बीवी पे हाथ उठा दिया उसने। बीवी को रोब में रखने का तो यही एक तरीका है। मैंने भी अपनी बीवी को समझा दिया है, सीख जाओ बेगम, वरना मैं भी बहुत बुरी तरह पेश आऊंगा।
सठिया गए हो क्या? बीवी पर हाथ उठाना बहादुरी नहीं, बुज़दिली है। और पुरएतमाद मर्द हाथों से नहीं बोलते, बीवी तो हमसफर होती है यार। मैंने तो आज तक अपनी बीवी पे हाथ नहीं उठाया और ना कभी उठाऊंगा। कभी सोचा इससे बच्चों पे क्या असर पड़ेगा? मेरी बात पे गौर करना। जाओ सेल्फ मारो।
बदलो अपनी सोच को, सबके लिए आवाज दो। बस्ती बस्ती नगरी नगरी एक हो के आवाज दो।
ओहो, अकेले अकेले कहाँ? थोड़ी हमें भी लिफ्ट करा दो।
यार ये आप लोग क्या कर रहे हो? अच्छे खासे पढ़े लिखे लगते हो, अकेली लड़कियों को देखकर जुमले कसना, सीटी बजाना, ऐसी हरकतें आपको जेब नहीं देती हैं? खवातीन को घर से बाहर महफूज माहौल फराहम करना हमारा फर्ज है।
बदलो अपनी सोच को, सबके लिए आवाज दो। बस्ती बस्ती नगरी नगरी एक हो के आवाज दो।
दे
भाई मैं जा रही हूँ, दरवाजा लॉक कर लीजिएगा।
यार वैसे मैंने देखा है कि तुम्हारी बहन रोजाना मोहल्ले के बस स्टॉप पे खड़ी होती है। मोहल्ले की लड़कियां इतना बाहर निकले अच्छा थोड़ी लगता है। बेहतर होगा कि अपनी बहन को समझा या उसे रोक दे।
मैं क्यों रोकूं उसे? उससे ये इख्तियार हासिल है कि ये फैसला वो खुद करे। देख भाई, हमें सोच बदलने की जरूरत है, लड़कियों को रोकने की नहीं। बल्ब ऑन कर। लो भाई, आ गई रोशनी।
बदलो अपनी सोच को, सबके लिए आवाज दो। बस्ती बस्ती नगरी नगरी एक हो के आवाज दो।
ला भाई पाना लिया।
उस्ताद जी,
हाँ
सुना है कल रात को मोहल्ले में क्या हुआ?
तुम्हें पता है मैं इन बातों में नहीं पड़ता। खैर क्या हुआ, कोई खास बात हुई?
अरे गजब हो गया उस्ताद जी, गजब हो गया। इजाज के गुस्से ने तो हद कर दी। बीवी पे हाथ उठा दिया उसने। बीवी को रोब में रखने का तो यही एक तरीका है। मैंने भी अपनी बीवी को समझा दिया है। सीख जाओ बेगम, वरना मैं भी बहुत बुरी तरह पेश आऊंगा।
सठिया गए हो क्या? बीवी पर हाथ उठाना बहादुरी नहीं बुज़दिली है। और पुरएतमाद मर्द हाथों से नहीं बोलते। बीवी तो हम सफर होती है यार। मैंने तो आज तक अपनी बीवी पे हाथ नहीं उठाया और ना कभी उठाऊंगा। कभी सोचा इससे बच्चों पे क्या असर पड़ेगा? मेरी बात पे गौर करना। जाओ जरा सेल्फ मारो।
बदलो अपनी सोच को, सबके लिए आवाज दो। बस्ती बस्ती नगरी नगरी एक हो के आवाज दो।
ओहो, अकेले अकेले कहाँ? थोड़ी हमें भी लिफ्ट करा दो।
यार ये आप लोग क्या कर रहे हो? अच्छे खासे पढ़े लिखे लगते हो। अकेली लड़कियों को देखकर जुमले कसना, सीटी बजाना, ऐसी हरकतें आपको जेब नहीं देती हैं। खवातीन को घर से बाहर महफूज माहौल फराहम करना हमारा फर्ज है। बदलो अपनी सोच को, सबके लिए आवाज दो। बस्ती बस्ती नगरी नगरी एक हो के आवाज दो।
फोन सुनना और इंटरनेट का इस्तेमाल हर किसी को बेफिक्री से करना चाहिए। टेक्नोलॉजी के बहुत से फायदे हैं, जैसे नई इंफॉर्मेशन, राब्ते और रोजगार के मौके। लेकिन कुछ लोग डिजिटल दुनिया में भी दूसरों को तशद्दुद, तकलीफ और बदनामी का शिकार बनाते हैं। किसी की तस्वीर और वीडियोस उनकी इजाजत के बगैर शेयर करना और उनसे झूठी चीजें बनाकर सच के तौर पर पेश करना, इसको डीप फेक कहते हैं। इसके साथ साथ किसी की जाती मालूमात जैसे कि पता या फोन नंबर इंटरनेट पर आम करना, जिसे डॉक्सिंग कहते हैं। ये सब जुल्म भी है और जुर्म भी। इसका शिकार कोई भी हो, बच्चे या बड़े, जहनी दबाव, पशेमानी और तन्हाई का शिकार हो जाते हैं। बात ना कर पाने की वजह से या बदनामी के खौफ से कई लोग खुदकुशी की हद तक जा पहुंचते हैं। कई लोग
potential. And to have this discussion, we have Dr. Luai Shabane, who is the country rep of UNFPA Pakistan. Prior to his position, his appointment, he served as the regional director of UNFPA for the Arab states since 2016. And along with him, we have the very known, I'm sure most of you recognize, Munize Jahangir, who's a broadcast journalist, an award-winning documentary filmmaker, currently anchoring a current affairs show on one of Pakistan's leading media news network, Aaj TV, called Spotlight. So she will co-chair. She is the co-chair of the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan and founder of voicepk.net. So I'd like to invite both of them on stage to have this very important discussion. Thank you.
Working? It's working. Well, thank you very much, Women of the World, for organizing this. And welcome to you all, to the Lahori audience, to this session. It's called Lost Opportunities, Lost Generations, How Structural Inequalities Are Holding Our Girls Back. And I'm in conversation with Dr. Louis Shabane, who is the representative of the UNFPA. It's the United Nations Population Fund for Pakistan. And prior to his current appointment, he served as the regional director of UNFPA for the Arab states since 2016. What will be very interesting for all of you is that he's a native of Palestine, of Ramallah, to be precise, and he has held several high-level profile national and international public service positions over the last 2 decades in official statistics, population census, population and development, program management, and advocacy with the UN system, in government and in the multilateral arena. Now, Dr. Louis, he started his professional career at Palestine Central Bureau of Statistics, where he worked from 1994 to 2005, and then he was then appointed the president. And then in 2009 is when he began his UN career with UNDP and UNCT and UNFPA in Iraq, and as a regional office for Arab states, he's been there since 2005. I can go on, but Dr. Louis warned me. He said, you know, when people respect us after we have spoken is when, you know, we should really think that we have the audience. So let's begin. I think what is very interesting is that we have not really heard people speaking from Palestine. Right now, it remains the flashpoint in the world today. We are all concerned about the images that we see coming out of Gaza. And Dr. Louis' family has been living in Gaza. Some parts of his family also live right now in Ramallah. It's your parents, am I correct? Well, my first question to you is, as a Palestinian, Dr. Louis, and I know we haven't gotten to the topic yet, but are you disappointed by the way the Islamic world has reacted to the killings in Gaza? Do you think that Tel Aviv had an idea that they would not react in that way and maybe felt emboldened to go on going on with the killing spree?
Thank you very much for having me. Assalamu alaikum. Disappointment is very light word. Everybody who stands for human rights is disappointed. This is the longest occupation in the world. The Secretary General of United Nations was very firm, very strong against the killing of women, against the killing of civilians from both sides. The response was very inappropriate. And the way how the Palestinians are killed now in Gaza is just horrible. People, just 2 days ago, more than 100 people were massacred where they were getting their assistance, humanitarian assistance that has been dropped by the army of Jordan. Therefore, disappointment is really very light. My people are feeling very much unhappy, very much angry with the whole international community, with everybody, from the superpowers to the Arab world, to the Muslim world, and I think they have the right to be unhappy because they have been left alone. In Rafah, for example, there are more than 1.5 million people who are starving, who are dying of hunger. This never happened in the recent history. And United Nations is very firm about this, calling for the ceasefire, calling for political solution, calling for ending this occupation and coming to peace. Palestinians are struggling to have a life while the Israelis are given a permit to kill. This is really unjust, and I hope that the Palestinian women in Palestine, if you just imagine a pregnant woman in these circumstances, if you imagine how an adolescent girl is growing up in this situation, you will feel how horrible the situation is. So I hope that the international community can come to ceasefire, can come to reconstruction of Gaza. We need peace for everybody, for Israelis, for Palestinians, for everyone. This is the right of life is a basic human right.
Well, certainly, I think that you speak to an audience which is very sympathetic, but the point is maybe the member states of the United Nations are not as sympathetic as they could have been. Now there are people leaving Gaza, and the building work has already started by Tel Aviv. Do you see any hope that these people will be able to return to Gaza?
Well, we cannot live without hope. If hope is not there, we cannot survive for moments. The situation is horrible. The situation is bad. Many people are blaming the United Nations. United Nations is a playground, but the player as member states who decide. The veto has been used by the United States for more than 85 times during the history, among them more than 40 against the Palestinian case. So, and this applies to Arab countries, Muslim countries who could have a voice. I hope that the international community can come together to direct the United Nations to do what should be done for the Palestinians, for the Israelis, for everybody, so that people, young women can live in peace. They can fulfill their aspiration. This is the main mandate of UNFPA. We say that no woman should die while granting life. Every young girl and adolescent boy to be able to fulfill their potential and to reach a situation where all women live with dignity and live without any sort of violence.
Well, thank you for that. And you speak of hope. I mean, before we carry forward, I would request the organizers if they can close the door, because, you know, acoustics don't work in the same way when doors are open. But I hope that we can keep the doors open for the girls around the world. And, you know, that brings me to my next question. You wrote an article where you visited Peshawar. And you said that there were 6 schools for boys in one area, but not a single school for girls. And when you asked the locals, why is there no money for a school for girls? And they said, well, now the land has become very expensive and we cannot give out land for schools. Yet at the same time, Dr. Loe, I went to Balochistan where the floods had hit. And one of the most hopeful images was that there was a young girl and she had kept her school uniform dry. And out of the rubble of her home, she had just hung that one school uniform. And in the morning, she would wear that school uniform and she would go to the school that had still remained open for her. So that was the hope. How have society in Pakistan failed to keep schools open for these girls who are so eager to go to school?
I have been in Pakistan for now almost 15 months. There are issues need to be unpacked, in my opinion. One of them is to unpack what is religious from what is social or cultural. Because having these together, there will be a strong pushback. I am coming from a country which has almost the same conservative environment. But women and girls in Pakistan, in my opinion, are missed opportunity for the nation. And without being able to unpack what is religious and what is cultural inherited, always there will be pushback and we will not be able to progress. Just having 60% of the 22 million out of school children are girls, you can imagine how these will be mothers, how these will be leaders. In one of the visits, I have been told by a number of men, in which through the engagement of men, that one of them, he said, I will never send my daughter-in-law to deliver under the supervision of a male doctor. I said, but you don't allow your daughters and your granddaughters to go to school. From where should we bring female doctors for you? You have to think about these matters. So in my opinion, there is a lot to be done on the social norms. I don't feel that religion, I am Muslim. I don't feel that Islam is doing any restriction against women. What is done, the barriers are coming from the social norms. As we speak about the friendship, the theme of this wow, in my opinion, we have to have women become friends of women first. If you look at the violence in domestic violence and gender-based violence, who is the guardian of that? I'm sorry to say that. It's our mamas, mothers-in-law, who are the ones. We have social hypocrisy. When I look at my daughter, I focus on rights. But when I look at my daughter-in-law, I look at duties. We have to look for the rights in both cases. Therefore, I feel in Pakistan, there are very great champion women, leaders. Many we can count, but this is not mainstream. We need to make it mainstream. Every single girl should have a space to choose, to enjoy her rights, and to decide. Because if they get the leadership, I am sure this is the prosperity for the nation of Pakistan.
Well, let me bring you to another question, but I'll tell you about the city of Lahore, for example, where you are. Just recently, a young woman found herself to be at the receiving end of a mob that accused her, and wrongfully so, of blasphemy. And it was not a policeman who rescued her, it was a policewoman who rescued her. So in our case, we've had a knight in shining armor, and it's not a man, it's a woman. So in Pakistan, for example, we have seen examples of women helping women. But one of the things that really frustrates me about let's say, the Western world, and that's what I wanted to talk to you about, is that whenever it comes to women's rights, they say, let's not give them rights because it's in their culture that they should not go to school, that they should be married at a certain age, etc. How does the United Nations deal with that? Because on one hand are fundamental rights, and on the other hand is, as you say, community guardians that say that this is our culture, which means that this woman cannot have, and she should be derived of her fundamental right. How do you approach that issue?
First of all humans are born with the same rights. No single nation, whatever this nation is conservative, will confess that their girls are born with less rights than others. The challenge that we need to make is how to safe land the international human rights within the culture. Because the culture eye is very important. If you fight with culture, you will be defeated. We should change from within. This is the only way. And the change can come if we are able to empower women, because only women can break barriers. Men cannot do that. State cannot do that. Women has to break these barriers. And when they break this, when they are educated, when they know their rights, and they find space. Now, the role of men is agents for change. Those fathers who can give their daughters the same space. Look at the shining women in Pakistan. From Benazir Bhutto, from Nafis Sadiq, you can name many women. The difference between those women and any girl in any small village in Pakistan is that these women were empowered. They were given the chance to choose. They're given the chance to be educated. The problem sometimes with the women issues that you go to many conferences about women in Pakistan and you find the majority of audience are women. Women affairs is not women issue. It's the whole community. And we have to work this. United Nations assume that everybody, every human being is born with the same rights. And how to enjoy these rights, how to fulfill these rights, fine. It could be subject to culture, could be subject to religion, it could be subject to local circumstances. Because you cannot impose on people. Let me give me a small story. When the Brits came first to Africa, they started to teach people, don't steal. And then there was the natural response from the natural Africans, what is stealing? Plants are there, anyone can take and eat. Cattle are there, anyone can get and slaughter and eat. We don't have this. So you cannot impose concepts on the community. You have to use the existing communities in order to make change so that it is acceptable and you don't have too much enemies from within the community. Therefore, I think what we are trying to do in UNFPA is to use the cultural lens, the culture with the heritage, with the civilization, with the religion, all these elements together to ensure that women are empowered, but the empowerment is genuine. Because in many occasions, if you look at those who are participating in the international conferences, you will have the cream of the society. You have the ladies who speak 3-4 languages. But we need the change to be for those people who are left behind, those who are living in villages, who are unable to access education, who are unable to get resources to be empowered. Therefore, I think we will continue this. The journey is very long, but we need more and more champion women who can help, who can lead. And we are here to support. We cannot suggest. We can share with you our experience, but you have to choose as Pakistanis. You have to choose your model of empowerment, your way of empowerment, because this has to come from within the community.
I'm imagining that it would be very difficult for you to deal with the Afghan Taliban government on women's rights. There we have the entire country wanting women's rights, but a government that is not even voted in, not wanting it. How would the United Nations approach that?
Despite all what is being said about Taliban, we have to make a rapport, at least to start with, and to make the change from inside. The Americans tried, and the international community tried to change the Afghan community for 20 years, and they were defeated. The Afghan community defeated the international community. They were unable to change. Look at the outcome of the last 20 years of the international engagement in Taliban, trying to impose on them how to change their life. Did they succeed? No. So we should, as I said, start from the grassroots there to bring similar experiences. People learn from their peers and they can change. And I have been engaged in a number of young Afghani girls. They are brilliant. They know what they want, but they are not the mainstream. We should help them to be the mainstream. I don't feel that imposing on any community will succeed.
I think Afghanistan is a very difficult case simply because everybody that I speak to in Afghanistan wants to go to school, but they are being deprived that. So it's a very heartbreaking situation. But let's come to Pakistan. In Pakistan, 3 of the provinces, the marriageable age for girls is 16. And one of the province, the marriageable age for girl is 18. As a country, we haven't really decided when a girl becomes a woman. You write about, girls that when there is early marriage, things start to go wrong from there. What is too early? Is 16 too early for a marriageable age?
Look, in my opinion, of course, the United Nations define childhood until the age of 18. And if you look at the mainstream in the world, the average age of marriage for women is beyond 24. Still in Pakistan, like in many developing countries where the population pyramid is still wide among the youngsters and very narrow at the older ages, still child marriage is an issue. I think what should identify the age of marriage is the maturity, not maturity physical to be able to reproduce, maturity to be a mother, maturity to be educated enough, maturity to be able to choose, maturity to identify how many kids she wants to have. So in my opinion, in my personal experience, I still feel 16 is not acceptable. 18 is not acceptable to me. I got married, my wife was 24. I have now, my kid is 21. When I speak to her, usually the discussion goes beyond 25. But of course, we cannot impose. But in my opinion, I'm telling her, you have to be ready. Look, marriage in the past was the only destination for women. And women were measured in their achievement, the KPI, the key performance indicators for a woman, if she was able to find a husband. This was the successful woman. And those women who don't have the chance to get married, the society used to look at them negatively. Today, in this generation, I can observe that marriage is one of the destinations. It is not the only destination. Therefore, I'm telling my daughter, be ready for a marriage that could succeed or not. In case if it doesn't succeed, you have to have your education, you have to have your job, you have to have your economic means so that you can continue your life. If you find somebody and you are happy with him, good for you, continue. But you cannot be living with somebody unhappy, exposed to violence, because you have zero opportunities. Therefore, I feel it is our way of thinking to ensure that there are options for survival with dignity. This is where we can identify if the age of marriage is good or not good.
I think that's very nice that you say survival with dignity. And I think that's what every human being, especially women, expect. But they haven't been given that, not in this country. Women as young as girls as young as 12, 11, 10, 9, 8 have been forcibly married off. And we see this every day in the news. And you write in one of your articles that the situation in Pakistan demands a faster, firmer, and bolder coordinated response so that every girl can grow up secure in the knowledge that her body is her own. In that context, what should the government immediately do? What should policymakers immediately do to ensure that girls here will be secure?
I think according to the norms of the United Nations, the way how the social contract is built between citizens and state is based on right holders, which are citizens, and duty barrier, which is the government and the local authorities. It is the responsibility of the government to ensure that every single girl is empowered to choose. Every single adolescent is empowered to enjoy the rights in the Constitution in the first place, and second, human rights if possible, at large. But at the minimum, the Constitution gives a lot of rights for women where women do not enjoy. There is a gap, not only in Pakistan, in many countries, there is a gap between what is written in the Constitution that is being voted by people and it is respected by the members of the nation and the practice. This goes to laws, but more important, what I have seen in Pakistan, too many laws, too many programs, but the enforcement of laws is the responsibility of the government. And I hope that the government reached a point that enforcement of laws become on the top of the agenda. This is why UNFPA, in our program in Pakistan, we have a separate output, according to our jargon, called accountability, where we engage with the government to ensure that they do what they say, what they formulate in terms of laws, they enforce these laws. It is something very important. But I would not also forget that the change should be also at the community level. We need the networks of young people, the networks of women, the networks of businessmen, all networks to work at the community level because the social norms are very strong in this country. In this country,
that is the challenge with working with Pakistan, if the social norms are very,
It is very conservative. It is very conservative.
We don't have any time for question and answers. We do not? Okay, well, I mean, I had many questions for you, but I think let's talk about digital violence because, just as a wrap up, because I think everybody over here uses social media platforms. And I know that the UNFPA is very actively working on these issues. What message really do you have for young people when it comes to social violence, especially for women, on the internet? How can they safeguard themselves?
3 messages. The first one, don't be shy. When young woman is exposed to cyber violence, she should not be silent. This is one. Second, for the government, we should not. It is shame on all of us if we stigmatize the victim, not the perpetrator. Third, it is the responsibility of the private sector, companies, to ensure that they have enough measures to protect people who go into social media. Social media is part of an important parcel of our life today. It is important way to ensure that we break too many barriers to learn, to be able to see how the other people in different places are living, how the rights are enjoyed. Therefore, it should be a safe space for every single adolescent girl, for every young girl, for every young man as well. So social media has to be safe, and digital crimes should take an attention from the legal perspective, but also from law enforcement perspective.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Lue, for coming all the way, traveling all the way, and having this important conversation for us. Thank you, women of the world, for having this conversation for us. And I think on behalf of everybody here, we stand in solidarity with Palestine, and our hearts go out to all the people who are suffering in Gaza. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
ओहो, अकेले अकेले कहाँ? थोड़ी हमें भी लिफ्ट करा दो।
यार, ये आप लोग क्या कर रहे हो? अच्छे खासे पढ़े लिखे लगते हो। अकेली लड़कियों को देखकर जुमले कसना, सीटी बजाना, ऐसी हरकतें आपको जेब नहीं देती हैं। खवातीन को घर से बाहर महफूज माहौल फराहम करना हमारा फर्ज है।
बदलो अपनी सोच को, सबके लिए आवाज दो। बस्ती बस्ती नगरी नगरी एक हो के आवाज दो।
भाई मैं जा रही हूँ, दरवाजा लॉक कर लीजिएगा।
यार वैसे मैंने देखा है कि तुम्हारी बहन रोजाना मोहल्ले के बस स्टॉप पे खड़ी होती है। मोहल्ले की लड़कियां इतना बाहर निकले अच्छा थोड़ी लगता है। बेहतर होगा कि अपनी बहन को समझा या उसे रोक दे।
मैं क्यों रोकूं उसे? उससे ये इख्तियार हासिल है कि ये फैसला वो खुद करे। देख भाई, हमें सोच बदलने की जरूरत है, लड़कियों को रोकने की नहीं। बलबोन कर। लो भाई, आ गई रोशनी।
बदलो अपनी सोच को, सबके लिए आवाज दो। बस्ती बस्ती नगरी नगरी एक हो के आवाज दो।
ला भाई, पाना लिया।
उस्ताद जी,
हाँ,
सुना है कल रात को मोहल्ले में क्या हुआ?
तुम्हें पता है मैं इन बातों में नहीं पड़ता। खैर क्या हुआ? कोई खास बात हुई?
अरे गजब हो गया उस्ताद जी, गजब हो गया। इजाज के गुस्से ने तो हद कर दी। बीवी पे हाथ उठा दिया उसने। बीवी को रोब में रखने का तो यही एक तरीका है। मैंने भी अपनी बीवी को समझा दिया है। सीख जाओ बेगम, वरना मैं भी बहुत बुरी तरह पेश आऊंगा।
सठिया गए हो क्या? बीवी पर हाथ उठाना बहादुरी नहीं, बुज़दिली है। और पुरएतमाद मर्द हाथों से नहीं बोलते। बीवी तो हमसफर होती है यार। मैंने तो आज तक अपनी बीवी पे हाथ नहीं उठाया और ना कभी उठाऊंगा। कभी सोचा है इससे बच्चों पे क्या असर पड़ेगा? मेरी बात पे गौर करना। जाओ जरा सेल्फ मारो।
बदलो अपनी सोच को, सबके लिए आवाज दो। बस्ती बस्ती नगरी नगरी एक हो के आवाज दो।
ओहो, अकेले अकेले कहाँ, थोड़ी हमें भी लिफ्ट करा दो।
यार ये आप लोग क्या कर रहे हो? अच्छे खासे पढ़े लिखे लगते हो, अकेली लड़कियों को देखकर जुमले कसना, सीटी बजाना, ऐसी हरकतें आपको जेब नहीं देती हैं। खवातीन को घर से बाहर महफूज माहौल फराहम करना हमारा फर्ज है।
बदलो अपनी सोच को, सबके लिए आवाज दो। बस्ती बस्ती नगरी नगरी एक हो के आवाज दो।
दे
भाई मैं जा रही हूँ, दरवाजा लॉक कर लीजिएगा।
यार वैसे मैंने देखा है कि तुम्हारी बहन रोजाना मोहल्ले के बस स्टॉप पे खड़ी होती है। मोहल्ले की लड़कियां इतना बाहर निकले अच्छा थोड़ी लगता है। बेहतर होगा कि अपनी बहन को समझा या उसे रोक दे।
मैं क्यों रोकूं उसे? उससे ये इख्तियार हासिल है कि ये फैसला वो खुद करे। देख भाई, हमें सोच बदलने की जरूरत है, लड़कियों को रोकने की नहीं। बलबोन कर। लो भाई, आ गई रोशनी।
बदलो अपनी सोच को, सबके लिए आवाज दो। बस्ती बस्ती नगरी नगरी एक हो के आवाज दो।
innate ability to create an impact, right, through our screens, through stage. But the live impact of a festival is underrated, I feel. A festival has the ability to create that communal feel, which is so live and so interactive and so alive, that it gives a kind of a vision of what a neighborhood, a community, a city, a country, a nation could look like. So here we are today, seeing a glimpse of the possibility of having artistic communities like this. And it helps to manifest that vision. So we're very lucky right now to have certain change makers and forces who are women, who are heading a lot of the festivals that we have recently come across in Pakistan. So the title of this next session is Festivals as Spaces of Change, because they most definitely are. Festivals are spaces to imagine a different world. Most spaces in Pakistan are very male-dominated. And in conducting festivals, we can create a vision of a society that we actually want to create. So I'd like to introduce a few powerhouses here. The founder of WOW, Women of World, Jude Kelly. Saima Aslam, founder and CEO of the Bradford Literature Festival. Qudsiya Rahim, founder of the Lahore Biennale Foundation. Amina Sayed, founder of the Adab Festival. Muniza Hashmi, founder of the Fez Festival. And this panel will be moderated by Zara Khan, founder of Art Devi. Please take it away, women.
Hello, thank you so much for being here this afternoon. I am delighted and grateful to be speaking on WOW Festival's wonderful stage and to be joined by these powerhouses of strong women who have brought so much change through the work that they do. So the title of this panel discussion is very, very apt, because these women, through the festivals that they run, have already and organically created very strong mediums of change. And I'm looking forward to hearing from them about how the work that they do, how the work that they want to do has been focused around this. Jude, I thought we could start with you. We are here at Wow Festival in Lahore. This was started by you 14 years ago, you said earlier when you were chatting. I wanted to ask you what led you to create Wow Festival, a place for women, a place for change, for dialogues, discussions, culture. Would you like to indulge me?
Well, first of all, thank you for welcoming me to Lahore. It's the second time I've been here. I've been to the WOWs in Karachi, and also it's always amazing for me to come and see the incredible work that the Pakistani curatorial team do. It's just a beautiful festival. And there are festivals, so it's their condition I want to give. And, and as we speak and sit here, there's a festival, a WOW festival happening in Istanbul. And I've just come back from the festival in Rio. Next month's festival in Athens. There are festivals in Australia. There are festivals all over the world. But when I started the WOW Festival 14 years ago, I had no idea that it was going to grow across the world like this. And I'm still a bit amazed. I mean, just to say something about me, I am a theatre maker. I started making drama, theatre when I was very young. I started my first company when I was 22. And I've always been interested in how audiences use the arts and conversation and culture to make the societies more cohesive, more progressive, more inclusive. That is the thing I care about the most, that you broaden out and you widen the tent so that everybody's included. And I was running a very large cultural institution in Britain called the South Bank Centre. And it was the 100th anniversary of International Women's Day in the UK, which was when most, but not all women got the vote. 100th anniversary, 14 years ago. And I realized that even though as a woman I had a very senior role in the arts, largely the stories that were being told in drama and in music and in film and in books, largely the history of all of that had been the history of what men had done and what men had achieved and the sorrows and sadnesses of men. Now, I love men, and I've got one of my own, and I've also got a son and a grandson, and I love my dad. But I feel very strongly that unless women's stories are given equal status on the narrative stages, then women won't have equal rights. There's a direct relationship to the importance of story and the equivalent in terms of the rights of a human. And I knew that even though women had been told that they couldn't do things, shouldn't do things, oughtn't to do things, it wasn't appropriate for them to do things, they did them anyway, if they could. And the result was that the world was infinitely richer because women had pushed to be doctors, they'd pushed to be lawyers, they'd pushed to be frontline workers, they'd pushed to write novels, and as a result, everybody's very pleased, with very few exceptions. Men are glad that women have made the progress they've made, even if they're not keen to make more progress. So I decided that I wanted to celebrate everything that girls and women had done in history, everything that girls and women were doing now, across all things, not just arts, but in every walk of life. And that by celebrating what we had achieved, we would be able to have the optimism to own up to what still had to be done. Because, it's slightly humiliating to endlessly be in a situation of saying, well, we're standing behind, but we're coming. It's kind of baffling that you should have to, and it's slightly humiliating to endlessly be doing it. But I felt that if we could be excited and thrilled indeed by what we had done amongst all of us, then we would have the courage and the stamina and the optimism to keep going forward. Now, a festival is really the only place that you can put together a mosaic of many, many stories told by women who own those stories and say all of these stories are equally interesting, equally important. Some are told by famous people, some are told by people who you've never heard of, but all of these stories matter. And there's something about a festival, well, innately celebratory. Nobody's frightened of the word festival. Everybody knows in a festival it will be a place where you can eat and drink and bump into strangers and be with your friends and have new conversations. And that's a freedom which women are not often offered. And so I also think that festivals suggest to women that they are safe spaces for difficult conversations. So that's why I started WOW. I believe in festivals as a force for good, artistically and culturally. And I think that we need difficult conversations, but we need to have joy in order to have difficult conversations well and emerge with a kind of new vigor.
Absolutely. And I love what you said about festivals being places of celebration. And I think women should be celebrated and should celebrate themselves every day. I remember listening to something Reese Witherspoon said, the Hollywood actress. She said that she was looking at scripts and there was always this one line that would come up. A woman would turn to the man and say, "Oh no, what should we do?" And she said, no, women never ever ask that question. It's always the woman who knows what to do, and she does it. And I believe that's true of all of you. And speaking of which, Amina, I wanted to ask you. You started the Karachi Literature Festival in Karachi, the first literature festival in Pakistan. Congratulations. And look at the impact it's already had. But I wanted to ask you, over the years of building up the Karachi Literature Festival, what was the impact like for women in terms of, did you see more authors who are female authors publishing books? Did more women start attending the festival? Were you able to gauge the very real impact that it was having in Karachi and perhaps in Pakistan as a whole?
Thank you, Zara. Assalamu alaikum. Can I just start by saying that I was always very conscious of the fact that our writers, particularly our women writers, who I felt were world class and not less than any writers globally, and I was very sad that they didn't get the recognition that they deserved. Their books wouldn't sell. They wouldn't get awards. A couple of awards that were given out in Pakistan were not credible. And all this deeply saddened me. And when I saw authors in other countries, how they were regaled and how they were honored and celebrated, I just felt that this must be done for our authors, and particularly our women authors, because I felt that they were even actually in a worse position than our men writers and poets and creative artists. So that was really the main reason that I started the Literature Festival. The first one that was, I think, held such that kind in 2010 in Karachi, the Karachi Literature Festival. And what I had in mind was this should become a movement. And at every festival, I would say that this is open source. Please take any idea you want, whatever you want from the festival, replicate it, just run away with it, do it in any way you want. And I am really delighted that it has, in fact, become a movement in Pakistan, and you see festivals happening all over the place. Now, about women writers, I think that really our festival has, I think the force behind it has been our women writers, authors, poets, actors, singers, dancers. They have taken part, and they have been extremely popular. And I find that this was an experience I was relating to somebody, that we got a very famous Indian woman writer to the Karachi Literature Festival, and I was delighted. I thought that, she's going to be a big hit. At the same festival, we invited Bushra Ansari. And, I was surprised to see that wherever Bushra went, there was a huge following behind her. She had a big fan club. And when she got into the author's lounge, they would be clamoring and banging the door to come in just to meet Bushra Ansari. And the Indian author, who actually, in a way, was a bigger writer and better known in India, was, almost ignored. And that's what made me realize that, again, our own artists and authors, they're the ones who can become celebrities. And which is, again, as I said, the reason for holding the festival. And I find that they are what made our festival. And many young writers, upcoming, emerging women writers, would flock to the festival. They would attend sessions. And I always, at every festival, I made it a point to include them and to give them a platform. And, I really feel that in some way, it has encouraged more women to write, and it has given them more confidence. Because, this kind of it was, at the festival, we were appealing to the community. It was free. People could come from anywhere, from all walks of life, so the actual public would be there. And I remember one of our women authors who was challenged by people from the audience with some really difficult questions. And she told me, she said, I'm so glad that I've got this feedback from my readers. I didn't know that they had, this is what they thought about my novel. So I felt that, a new narrative was created, a very positive narrative about women, and it actually acted as a catalyst to encourage other women to take part in these arts. It gave them confidence. It gave them a sense of connectivity with other women when they shared their experiences, the difficulties that they faced, their challenges. We would invite women, and these women were role models, and they would be on the stage, and a lot of young women would be watching them and actually learning from them and gaining confidence and feeling that we can do this also. Thank you.
Thank you, Amina. You summed up the importance of festivals so well, because you're right. It's an opportunity for people to engage with authors, writers, cultural change makers from their own country who they may not have known before. And also, both the Karachi Literature Festival, the Lahore Literature Festival, draw in such engaging voices from around the world. Qudsiya Rahim, you started the Lahore Biennale, the Lahore Biennale Foundation, this wonderful public arts festival that takes over Lahore once every 2 years for a period of several weeks, often months. And I think that is such a beautiful celebration of the architecture and the arts in a city like Lahore. And it's public facing. Can you tell me a little bit about the public who you wanted to engage with and what you hope that men and women and children would perhaps take home after engaging with the arts, after having access to public spaces in hopefully a safe environment?
Safe environment. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm very honored to be with all these young women who have far more experience than I do in the field of public engagement and creating festivals. And thank you for British Council and all our hosts and Olomopolo and everybody who's engaged in bringing about this festival, and especially Judy. What a wonderful idea, women of the world. It's a good way to celebrate and recognize each other. And I believe you've founded several other initiatives which are quite notable. For us, the engagement or our mandate was very simple: bring art in public spaces, create a dialogue through arts to see, bring people together to see how we can collectively look at our collective heritage, look at art and culture. Lahore is one of the, culture capitals of Lahore, Pakistan, and was also known as the culture capital of undivided India at some point, right? So we have a lot of embedded knowledge, embedded history, and last few years, like around
when we moved from, my family, when we moved from New York, came back to Lahore, we realized that, you know, right after Benazir's assassination, we saw a lot of stress. The city went through a lot of stress, and we saw these walls, you know, building right in front of our eyes. It was a different city from what we had grown up in. It was a different city, and the response to the city for safety and other realities that were then existing, you know, it was literally closing the doors to its own citizens. It just felt like very, very alien to us, people who are living in Lahore, because Lahore, Lahore hai, right? And jisne Lahore nahi dekha usne, you know? So all these relationships, our relationship to the city was going through with a lot of stress. And I think Lahore Biennale was a response to the citizens' response to take charge of our own narrative, to take ownership of our own arts and culture and heritage. And I think it is a collective group that came together to ask these very important questions, you know, and see how the larger city would respond to it. And as you see that we, over the years, we have built these beautiful relationships locally, internationally. We have, we are able to actually engage through arts in ways that, and create new dialogues amongst us, which we very, over time we have developed. Public spaces are a very, so some of the learnings that we had in public spaces and working public spaces, I was never looking at creating a space specially for someone. So it was not ever about the space has to have more women in it, the space has to have more minorities in it. The idea was to create a space where everybody felt safe, where everybody felt valued, included, and the programmings are made such that it naturally kind of embeds itself in the city, and the city responds to those conditions. And one of the ways that we decided to do that was go and study the various patterns where people were naturally visiting, for example, the parks or the heritage places, or other kind of public spaces where some kind of cultural or artistic engagement was happening, and then through those places re-engage with people. So our relationship was very simple. And I mean, that's why it kind of, you know, has a way in which it keeps moving on, and is because we're not necessarily going to make big claims, but just exist and then create a nucleus around it, a network around it.
You're right, Kutsia. The Lahore Biennale has expanded so organically. And organically over the years, because of this focus on art and culture and freedom to see these different sites and spaces, and especially some of Lahore's heritage buildings, this public space has developed on its own. And that's what's so beautiful and natural about it. And I think that's exactly what festivals can do. And of course, every festival, as we're slowly discovering, has its own theme, its own set of values, and also its own focus. I mean, coming to that, Saima, I wanted to ask you about the Bradford Festival that you started 10 years ago now in Bradford. Can you tell me a little bit about whose stories you wanted to tell, who you wanted to come to your festival, and kind of how you got going? Do you think you've accomplished all that you set out to do as the 10th anniversary comes by?
Thank you. Well, firstly, again, like everybody has said, it's such a pleasure to be here. It's always a pleasure to be in Lahore, but to be here with all these amazing women, it's such a pleasure. Thank you for having me. If I'm going to talk about the stories I wanted to tell, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Bradford and its place in the UK. So Bradford is It's one of the largest cities in the UK. It is the second largest Muslim population in the UK, mainly South Asian, mainly Pakistani. And it has a very particular place in the national imagination. So Bradford is also known as Bradistan. It has been the place where the UK press tend to come to take the pulse of the Muslim community. It has had its moments in the past. It was a city that burnt the satanic verses. It had 2 race riots. But if I take you a little bit further back, it's actually a city of migrants. And that was what the wealth of the city was built on. So it had, about 300 years ago, it had a big wave of Irish migration. In the 1800s, Jewish German merchants. And they were the ones who built the wealth of the city, because actually it's inherently a manufacturing and textile city. So those intrinsic links to empire. And then it had a wave of Eastern European migration. So we are the second largest Ukrainian population in the UK, the largest one outside London. And then the South Asian migration. And it is a city of sanctuary. So it has historically welcomed people from around the world. When the war first started in Syria, we took 50% of the refugees that came to the UK. So it's a city, So it's a city that has over 180 languages spoken. And it is political in a way that many other cities aren't. So the festival came from a number of different reasons and desires, if you like. One was to actually, when I went to festivals, when I went to literature festivals, or when I go to many cultural spaces, it is a very particular audience. And what we tend to find is wherever you are, the people who have money, they can engage with culture. It's normally the people who don't have money who can't engage with culture. And they tend to be the people who need to engage the most. So, when I go to literature festivals, I see children there. Now, they're the children who already have books. The ones who don't have books, their parents haven't brought them there because that's not natural for them necessarily. Or a lot of times you just can't afford it if you haven't got that money. So when the festival was being set up, one of the things was to actually take charge of, and I'm of Pakistani heritage, so I'm British and of Pakistani heritage. So I wanted to be able to take charge of the stories that were being told about the city, particularly about the Muslim community. I felt it was really important that it was the Muslim community telling the stories and having charge of the discourse rather than those stories being angled at that community. But I wanted it to be a festival that actually talked to everybody in the city, because my reasoning was that actually if you talk to everybody in Bradford, you are automatically relevant for the rest of the UK, and you are internationally relevant. We have a very particular narrative at the moment around migrants and refugees. And the image is always one of people who are, wanting and needing, and they are, but we are having to welcome them in. But actually, if you start to